Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host Shelby Lewis, and today we have an exclusive interview on the Paradise Fires. I have two expert testimonies from retired fire captains John Lord and Matt, and we're going to examine their findings after their many hours of investigations. Some of the topics this 3 hours that we have together will be including dues, smart meters, and some of the forensics. So without further ado, welcome John, Lord, and Matt. John,
thank you for having us.
Thanks, Shelley.
Thanks. John, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is John Lord, and I am a veteran of the fire service. I'm currently retired and have been retired for about 10 years and researching the truth very heavily during that whole interval. So I woke up somewhere around 2008, 2009 and started diving down rabbit holes.
Nice, we love that. Digging below the surface.
I also have a lot of experience working with the fire academy and the paramedic academy teaching. So
wow.
About 20 years.
Wow, and your background is also military. You're a veteran?
I did 4 years in the Navy prior to getting trained as a paramedic.
Yeah, so you have a lot of medical background, a lot of medical expertise and how to save lives. And so you carried that with you into the firefighting.
Yes.
So thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Matt, could you share with the audience a little bit?
Yeah, my name's Matt. I'm a recently retired firefighter out of a Bay Area Fire Department where I served 30 years. My career started in 1985 when I went to work which was CDF, which is now CAL FIRE, in 85, and I've been working for the fire service ever since. In my career, I also became a paramedic. So I was a paramedic involved in hazmat and also helped out teaching academies. So that's what I've been doing. I started researching, going down rabbit holes since early 2000s when I read the book Creature from Jekyll Island and then took off from there. So I came to realize that things are not really what we think they are.
We haven't been told the truth on so many things.
That's an understatement.
Exactly. Well, I'm so thankful you guys are my guests today on Down the Rabbit Hole. I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of give our audience a disclaimer of such because we might have some people that on our radio show that are a little bit, fringy, or I just want to make sure that you guys could give kind of a disclaimer.
Thank you. The disclaimer I would like to make is I believe that the Earth is a sphere. I know we've been lied to about a lot of things, especially I don't believe everything NASA says, but I do believe it's spherical. I don't believe it's flat. So
Okay.
I just want to get that out there.
Absolutely. I totally appreciate that.
And my disclaimers, I have a couple here. I concur with Matt. My research has taken me the other way. And I've done extensive research on the hollow Earth.
Right.
And I've already shared this with Michelle, so she knows.
Yeah.
And then a second disclaimer is that my views do not represent my fire department.
Right.
I have that level of experience and background, but
That's right.
I seriously doubt that anybody in my fire department is on the same page. So.
And I want to say the same thing, and that's the reason I'm not giving the department that I work for, just due to that.
Right on. Okay, so the views of the show do not represent our respective affiliations with any of the places we've worked. These are our own opinions, our own findings, our own conclusions. And one thing I think we can all agree on, whether or not we believe the Earth is a ball, a globe, a flat, a hollow, is that we've been lied to on so many levels, and we're just all going down this journey together. And not everybody comes to the same conclusions at the same time. And my ideas may change, 5 years from now, but the fact is we're trying to learn the truth. And so that's the whole point of the show, is we're digging below the surface and we're going deep. And so thank you guys so much for being here. I want to get right into the Paradise Fires though. Okay. So John, could you please tell us why the interest in the Paradise Fire?
Well, what happened is October 9th, 2017, when we experienced the Northern California fires and the Tubbs fire, Matt and I became aware of all these fires starting at once, and it was incredibly suspicious. We couldn't explain, there was no abnormal weather or anything that would have caused the fires to all start at once. So over the period of time when those fires were burning, there was great cause for alarm in terms of rate of spread and everything else. So I began researching what was going on with these fires. And what I came very quickly to see was not only was the number of starts and the rate of spread with these things highly unusual, is that there were so many anomalies with the fires that I started doing a deeper dig into it.
It's the exact same thing for me too. I think there was 178 fires between the group of counties. I forget how many counties, 5, 6 counties.
Yeah, 5 or 6
170.
counties.
And I was listening to them all night long when it happened on my ham radio, and it was unbelievable. I mean, we've had high wind many times. We're high like we had that night. The winds did come up, and it was howling at my house. But 178 fires, 10 fires, okay. 178 is off the charts,
Wow.
off the charts, and it just felt that night like, oh my God, something's not right. It just felt like we were being attacked. That's how it seemed
Interesting.
that night.
It always starts that way, huh, Matt? It starts with a bad feeling.
Yeah, and literally where I live, I'm on the side of the mountain. I was looking out and I could actually see just a wall of red, the flames out over Santa Rosa, and I listened to the fire on the radio, and with the fire crews, I listened to the fire march from Calistoga in just several hours all night long into Santa Rosa, crossing 6 lanes of 101 and burning down the Kmart.
Right.
And unlike anything that I've experienced in 33 years in the fire service, I was listening to the whole thing, so it was
Wow, so
unbelievable.
did it spook you in terms of, you said you've never really experienced anything like that. What was it specifically? Just the rate of...
Well, that fire in particular, but how many fires? I mean,
Okay.
there were crews that were given assignments and they couldn't go. There were fires that they had no one to dispatch to that night. I was listening to that. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then with the aftermath of actually going down and taking a look at the devastation, where you had melted steel I-beams amongst trees that were still standing, that stood out as,
Things
So
that
this
make
was the
you go,
Santa
huh?
Rosa fire, you're saying you
We're
saw
talking
this?
about, yes, this was the Santa Rosa. This was over here.
October
Okay.
2017.
Yep.
So yeah, so we've been dealt up this set of circumstances more than once. So in July, we had the river fire and the ranch fire, which they ended up combining those two and calling them the Mendocino Complex.
Okay.
And usually they name a complex fire when the fires join together, which I don't really think that they did, but anyway, that's what they did. So they were burning from west to east
Which is unusual.
toward, no, that's.
Is it west, east to
Yeah.
west is what happened in
Yeah.
Paradise, right?
Right.
Okay.
But they were coming down on us like a freight train, and they went to evacuation for here.
Whoa, Lake County.
Okay, so we went to advisory, and I was already aware of the fire, so I was all ready to go. I had everything I was going to bring with me all packed up, and they very quickly went into mandatory evacuation. I talked with a few of my neighbors. I said, hey, they're going mandatory evacuation. Don't wait too long to get out. And I hit the road.
Wow.
So, very alarming. And I was actually unable to get back into my house for 5 days.
Really?
So, yeah.
So you're saying that the way the fires were, you recognized the same kind of pattern that you saw in Santa Rosa as well as what you were seeing happening in Lake County. to the point of...
Yeah, there was some similarities, but I mean, it was just very threatening. To be involved like that and to understand that it could burn into the town that I live in, the community I live in.
Close to home.
Yeah, and actually could destroy the house.
Right.
So what happened is we did some research around those as well, and this kind of brings us up to current events, which is the Paradise Fire. And
So we saw some anomalies on the Tubbs fire, the one in Santa Rosa. We saw some anomalies that we had never seen before. We saw total destruction of structures and cars that were flipped upside down.
Wow.
Because the fire was so bad or the wind was so bad, flipped upside down, literally.
Wow.
A lot of evidence, a lot of photographic evidence of this, of cars flipped upside down on the Tubbs fire. First time I had ever seen anything like that in my career. And the structures were burned completely. Usually when a structure burns, I mean, usually we're there, so it's hard. But even if we're not there and a structure burns, there's usually not total destruction. These burned with high heat, higher heat than normal, it seemed like to me at the time, and to melt twist the steel that was twisted. And so those were some of the anomalies we saw then. And while the steel was twisted and things were melted that take 2,700 degrees to melt, a lot of garbage cans were fine. Which
Really?
Yeah. So that was some of the first time we really noticed that. And a lot of the forest was still intact. So that was, it's kind of like, that seems kind of strange, but we kind of didn't really. We knew something was up, something was different, something, they didn't burn like they normally burn.
Right.
And then, and so we went up to Paradise to check that out because we knew something wasn't right from that one. And when we got up there, it confirmed even much more what we had seen in
Really?
the Tubbs
So
fire.
same patterns of anomalies where you have a 2,700 degree, maybe, I don't want to throw this number out there, but an iron tub that's completely demolished, or granite countertops are completely demolished, as opposed to like 1,700 degree forest fire. The heat temperatures weren't matching up.
Exactly.
And then you had like garbage cans that were just standing there that didn't get incinerated at all.
I pretty much in the heavily damaged areas up in Paradise, every vehicle that we saw was total destruction.
Really?
Total destruction, burned rims burned. But
if you looked at one, you looked at them all.
Yes.
Because the burn patterns are so consistent from one car to another, completely destroyed. None of the combustible materials used to make that car, the fan belts, the radiator hoses, all the stuff under the hood, none of the combustible materials are left. They're gone. They're incinerated.
Wow.
And these are cars that are parked. These aren't cars that were in the garage. I mean, those two suffered the same fate. But these are cars on the road, on the side of the road, in the road, that
in the driveway.
This forest fire burned down to nothing, or down to just the bare whatever was metal that hadn't melted. That was what was left.
Just like a skeleton.
It's skeleton, yes.
Of the vehicle.
Exactly.
Whoa.
So it's crazy, and the melted glass is also unusual. Consistently, we found evidence where it had burned the rubber gasket or the adhesive that holds the windshield into the body, where that had failed and the windshield had kind of fallen inward across the top of where the dashboard would be, and the glass literally formed to the channeling around the windshield. So it didn't melt per se, but it got hot enough to distort.
Whoa.
And then there was some in the vehicles. I was able to see some evidence of molten glass in the vehicles.
Really?
But that was more common where it took so much heat it just kind of
warped it.
Yeah.
And all these subdivisions and communities that we came across in Paradise, a lot of them had some decent separation between them. And if all the canopy had been burned, if it had been total devastation throughout the forest, then it would have been easier to explain that, hey, this thing was just so hot, that's why everything burned the way it did. But the canopy never burned on this fire.
The canopy, you mean the trees, the tops of the trees?
The tops of the trees, the tops of the trees. So, which on a good, real bad fire conditions, that's going to happen. A real hot forest fire, that's going to happen, and that didn't happen. So,
On a real big, real hot fire, when the fire gets into the tree, okay, when it gets into the tree, normally the heat carries it upward, so we call that a crowning fire.
Okay.
So, and we were not seeing evidence of that. Remember that when we went up toward Magalia and we're looking at the canyon part where it burned?
yeah, by Pence.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did see we saw some serious anomalies. So we went up Pence Road and we were looking to the west on Pence Road before you get up towards Paradise. And it's a pretty steep gorge. Looking down, it looked like a normal forest fire, vegetation fire. You could see everything had burned like you would expect it to burn. But then when the plane we were on, the flat up above that we were on, everything that was burned, it was grass and trees and brush. All the brush was burned at the base, literally burned out at the base, and the roots were burned down. But the dry leaves on the manzanita were unburned. It was only burned at the base, and that's what we saw time and time again. All oak trees, all these trees were burned from the inside out.
Wow.
And that was just unusual. So it was almost like it looked like two different fires. The down in the gorge in the canyon, it looked like what you'd expect, a ripping normal fire, and then up above where you had the fuels weren't as close together.
The thing that caught my attention when we were driving there is the fact that if my arm is a tree, is the fire concentration never got into the tree top.
Right.
So it was almost like it burned the mid-range part of the tree and left the crown alone.
Wow.
And that is highly unusual because usually, with the heat rising, even if it's being driven by wind, it climbs into the crown real easily and then burns the entire tree.
But what you were saying is that you said it looked like just the trees were being burned from the inside out.
Being
What would
burned
cause that?
from the base, burned from the base and burning down into the roots. I'll tell you the story about the one we saw at the school. So, we'd never seen, if it was one tree that we had seen, that's weird, I wonder how that happened.
We probably looked at, 50 trees that happened to, Matt, up there?
At least, lots and lots of trees. We had...
It's just the ones we saw.
Wow, let me check one thing. You guys keep talking.
So,
Okay.
we went to Pearson Elementary School, and there was a large tree that was inside the blacktop. It probably had 60 feet plus, at least, all the way around it, of pavement, of blacktop around it. It was cut off about a foot level high. All the exterior bark was fine. It was unburnt. It was, maybe 2 inches thick. Inside was completely burned out.
Wow.
So I have, how do you explain that? And I've heard, I saw a video trying to explain it gets into the roots. Well, the roots were unreachable due to the pavement that was over it. So that doesn't make any sense to me. So
Right.
somehow these trees were burned really hot at the base, and that's where they got really, really hot. The other anomaly with a lot of these trees is some of them you'd have dry grass in the area or dry leaves on the ground
Right.
that were unburned, and that was just unexplainable to me.
Yeah, the area we surveyed going up Skyway from Chico,
Yeah, well, the first
the
day.
totality of the destruction of fuels on the ground was like
Yeah.
nothing I've ever seen, because these fires appear to be smart fires.
I like that term. I like that term.
And they're
That's a
also
good
very
term.
selective about what they burn.
Wow.
Okay, but the totality of the destruction, it left nothing. It was down to soil. So you would expect to find, pockets of pine needles and leaves and other organic debris, and we couldn't find any of that.
Wow.
I mean, it was just basically burned everything combustible all the way down to the native soil.
Really? So it's,
And this was a very large geographic area that I'm talking about. And then again, the tree.
The trees were burned at the base, and many of them were actually fallen over because and then you look and they're hollowed out from the burning at the base. And a lot of them created craters, a couple 2 or 3 foot deep craters where they had burned out the whole root system of the tree,
Whoa.
the root ball of the tree.
Not just craters, but we got pictures of some where you can actually see where the roots went down
Tunnels.
into the earth like tunnels, like gopher tunnels.
oh, you're kidding.
No. And there was no evidence of any charred wood inside those holes where the roots used to be.
So like disintegrated them.
Almost just like it disintegrated them. I didn't see any ash in the ones that we looked at. I didn't see any charred wood.
Whoa.
They just were like literally gone.
Like uprooted, literally, without a trace.
Like somebody uprooted the tree almost and left a hollow there, without disrupting the soil.
Wow.
It was the most
Like it
bizarre thing I've ever seen. And the one of the other things is that Matt talked about this already, but we saw mature, probably scrub oak, Matt, and madrone trees. I mean, we're talking good-sized trees, right? So these madrone trees and these scrub oaks, where there was destruction of the trunk down near grade, and then the tree just kind of
Wow.
in all directions, and none of the branches were burned.
Whoa.
There was no indicators of any burning on any of the branches or the foliage,
So just the base of the tree.
just the base of the tree.
And like manzanita, it actually usually has several branches that go up. I saw several manzanita bushes, big ones, where they just, instead of, it's all just down burned because the base had burned. So
In
they just
all
open up.
Wow.
directions. Just like an umbrella, an
Yeah.
open umbrella upside down,
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you find, I was just briefly up there, we couldn't go into the main area, we were only able to go into, what is the name of that town, where the dam
Chico?
is?
Oh.
Concow.
Concow.
I went there, and we saw some trees that actually could still see the changing color of the leaves. So it felt like it was autumn up there, but then there on the base it was burned. Did you see that too?
Absolutely. So that was my point, is a lot of these burned at the base, and a lot of these leaves that they had, like manzanita, a lot of times, if it's a ground fire, that's going to cause
Highly
total
combustible.
devastation.
Highly combustible.
The
Right.
dead leaves, because a lot of
Right.
times the manzanita, they're still standing, half the branches are dead already, because that's just the life cycle of them, and half are still alive. And all the dead leaves were unburned. But at the base, it created a crater.
Wow.
So that's not typical fire behavior from a wildland or vegetation fire. That's just not the way that, I've been on a lot of them, and I've never seen anything like it.
Wow.
So,
And this example that we're giving with the trees, it wasn't just isolated areas. I mean, we saw it just repeatedly
Yeah.
over a large geographical area that had been involved in the fire. So,
Could you talk about the guardrails that you saw up there? 'Cause you mentioned it about the fire.
I have to backtrack a little bit
Okay.
to tell you about the guardrails. Okay, so the river fire burned over 175, which is Hopland Grade.
Okay.
And the ranch fire burned down Highway 20 from west going east.
Okay.
Okay. And it's probably a little better than a week or so after the fires were out and things kind of returned to somewhat normal. I had to go to Ukiah, actually down to Petaluma, and I was taking my old toolbox down to my son, so I didn't want it rolling around and back on Hopland Grade, so I took 20 west toward Ukiah, and I had already become aware of this guardrail destruction,
Okay.
and I couldn't explain how these guardrails got so fried. There was huge areas where the steel on the guardrail was literally sagging down to the ground. And I remember when I first saw it, God, man, it looks like somebody drove like a D8 across that. But it wasn't crushed, and there's no scuff marks on the pavement. I go, nah, that wasn't driven over. It sagged for some reason. But here's the roadway, okay?
Okay.
So picture this as roadway. And you have a section of guardrail here. So you have no fuel here to burn. Then underneath the guardrails, you have light fuels like grasses and whatnot. And the destruction on these posts was unbelievable, unbelievable. And so I went down to Petaluma, did my thing down there with my son, and then on the return trip, I came over 175, and I'm seeing the same thing on 175 with the guardrails. And some of them you could explain the intense heat based on the topography. You know, some of them were, you know, where you had a canyon that was, you know, fairly steep and plenty of fuel in it, and then the guardrail at the top. So some of them could be explained like that, but other areas, I couldn't explain the destruction, because I would expect to find just light fuels like grasses and whatnot underneath them. So I got really suspicious of that, and then secondarily, a couple weeks after that, I was going to Ukiah, and I thought, you know, I'm going to stop and take some pictures of the guardrail destruction. Yeah. So it had just kind of piqued my interest. So I'm driving through, and oh, flagman ahead, one lane ahead, oh, okay. So we got stopped right around Blue Lakes, and by the time we got rolling, there was, you know, 100 cars in line. Right, kind of makes it hard to selectively pull over and look for evidence. Okay,
Right.
and I'm experiencing the biggest Caltrans crew that I have ever seen.
Right.
And I have lived in California all of my life except for the 2 years I was in Japan in the service.
Okay.
I have never seen anything like that. And this was fairly soon after the fires. So they sent this army of men and machinery, and they were replacing all these guardrail sections.
Interesting.
Okay, and then on 175, Hopland Grade, same thing's going on up there. Guess what else they're replacing?
All the pipes?
The culverts.
Wow. Oh, they melted? The culverts? We don't know.
We don't know.
Wow.
But they're replacing them for some reason. That one I couldn't figure out at all.
Wow. And could you explain to our listeners, what is a culvert?
Generally, under the roadway, a culvert is heavy steel, corrugated, galvanized steel. And it's just to allow for,
Like the ribs,
runoff.
The ribs of the road, or where the guardrails are?
It's where water flows underneath the road.
Okay,
Underneath
got
the
it.
road,
So it
right.
doesn't wash out the road.
Yeah.
It's like a big pipe.
Wow,
underneath
so under the road, they're replacing those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which they had to cut the pavement and then pull the old one out and put the new ones in. So,
Yeah, and so on top of what he's saying, I noticed the same thing. And what I noticed, and he was talking about, where these guardrails typically are on the side of the road, the fuel is sparse, okay? And you'll have light grass often, very light grass, sparse, not, you know, a little here, a little there.
Right.
And what I noticed is I saw a lot of posts burned that, how did that burn when some of the grass around it didn't burn? That was the part that,
there wasn't enough fuel around it to support the destruction of the posts.
And so that's when I started, it just didn't make sense to me. How come, and so then I started thinking, God, I wonder if something to do with the metal. That was what, and I think we were both kind of thinking, I wonder if the metal has something to do with that. Wire just doesn't make sense for a normal fire. I wonder if something's different. These are 6x6 posts, which, you know, if you have fuel up against them, they'll burn, but these didn't have, a lot of them didn't have fuel up against them. You know, and some of them, yeah, might have had enough fuel to get them going, but it just didn't seem to match. And all the guardrails are replacing that I've seen, at least up at Paradise, they're all metal posts now, no more.
All metal posts?
All metal, 100% metal, so no
Really?
wood.
So
No more wood.
that was the first thing we noticed when we were going up Skyway, and that would have been on December 2nd, right?
Yeah.
We were going up Skyway, and I said, oh, look at all these guardrails have been replaced.
Really?
Like
Already.
immediately. So
Wow.
there's there's been a push after these fires to immediately replace the guardrails, and like miles and miles of guardrails
Wow.
for whatever reason. It just seemed, and the way that they burned, you know, you think, why not, if maybe one or two posts might have burned, why not just replace one or two posts?
Right.
But they're replacing all the guardrails, so it just seemed...
Highly unusual.
Seems strange to me,
Yeah.
and it seems strange for a lot of the guardrails that I've seen driving, that they would have needed to be replaced, and that the 6x6 wood post would have burned. And so that's when it started kind of matching up with some of the stuff we were seeing up there. Metal cars, total incineration to
Yeah.
metal cars, plastic garbage cans.
Talk about the
fine.
wheels, Matt.
Right.
Yeah, so the wheels of the vehicles. So this is and this is all kind of speculation, but one of the things with the wheels, again, when we both fought a ton of car fires over our career. The thing is, we usually put them out before they're totally down to nothing. So that can skew our view. But we've come across fully involved cars that have burned when we weren't there, that happened in the night and no one called them in or whatever. So we've seen both, but.
Okay.
Like he said, every car, total destruction, nothing left except the steel, the steel belt were all there, but nothing left at all that was...
The wires in the steel belted radial,
A radial tire?
Yeah.
but the tires were completely destroyed.
Whoa.
And the
it's-
rims.
It's like boats, trailers, you know, these vessels that wouldn't readily burn, that were on pavement, that down to nothing. I mean, so
Wow.
completely, so it's just, where did the heat come from? How did that happen? And so,
We couldn't explain it, in most cases, we could not explain it by the surroundings of the vehicle. In other words, some of them were parked in parking lots or in driveways. There would have been no fuel source, but obviously something caught him on fire. And as I said before, all the combustible materials in there, which when you think about your car, you've got plastic panels,
Yeah.
plastic
yeah.
dashboard,
Yeah.
your seats are plastic generally,
Steering wheels, all
steering
of
wheels, carpeting,
that. Wow.
but there's absolutely no evidence of any combustible material in there.
complete devastation.
Of these vehicles.
Complete devastation.
And your job is to, as firefighters, is also to kind of recreate the scenario of how could have this happened? And you're saying this doesn't make sense. It's in a freaking open parking lot where it's just pavement. What triggered this fire to
So
this level?
back to the wheels.
Okay.
I did not observe any cases up there with total destruction of the cars where it melted steel rims. Okay, steel rims. I didn't see any evidence of that. They look to be generally intact,
Okay.
but the alloy wheels that are commonly
Aluminum? The aluminum?
yeah, it's an aluminum alloy.
Right.
So those were actually melted, and then there's rivulets of what was molten aluminum running down the street. And I think we've all seen images of that by
Right.
now. But again, that was a consistent finding.
What kind of heat does it take to melt the alloy wheels? Do you know offhand?
it's a range, okay? It's a range.
1,200, something like that.
I think,
Well, alloy's probably a little more.
yeah,
A little more,
like,
yeah.
like, it's a range,
Yeah.
maybe like 1,300 to 1,500, I think.
Yeah, that sounds probably. I think-
Gotcha.
But here's the other
Yeah.
thing, and this is like a really an important point to
Okay.
make. When you think about a guardrail, you're talking something that's maybe 30 inches high
Okay.
off the ground?
Yep,
Okay. So heat likes to go up
Yes.
normally.
yep,
Okay.
yep.
So we already discussed the lack of fuels underneath the guardrail, okay? And the same with the cars, because our experience tells us that on a fully involved car fire, that normally there's not enough combustible materials around the tires to cause that kind of destruction. So, typically you'll have, your outer fender
Right.
of the car, and then there's a wheel well on the inside, and typically those are plastic. But it's highly unusual for something that is that low to the ground to receive enough heat from other things that are burning to cause that kind of destruction.
Right, because you're saying it has no fuel, there's no
There's not enough
grass,
fuel
there's
around it,
no
exactly.
leaves to like spark that. And
And
so,
I am saying that the inner well is combustible, and
Right.
Matt and I have both seen, flames blowing out of there. But typically in a fully involved structure or car fire, the tires do not fail. And, once in a while one will blow. It'll get enough heat,
Right, right.
and it'll also,
right,
you'll hear it blow. But I have
This was on
never...
every vehicle.
Every
vehicle.
vehicle, total destruction, every vehicle, and that's where the anomalies, and the
So wild.
same with the structures. And that's,
Wow.
and one thing we noticed with the structures was, we went up one place, say up Pence Road, and we saw a couple, the house, all the walls fell inward, total destruction to the house, all fell inward. The stucco walls that had fallen inward, they're fine. But
Okay.
total destruction to the house, total
Okay.
destruction to the house. A garage, same thing. Everything, you could walk right around the whole foundation, nothing, no debris except the gusset plates that had popped out there. Everything had fallen inward, which told us that these structures are pretty, they look like they're burning from the inside out. The most heat is on the inside of the structures.
Really?
Which in a forest fire, that
outside.
you wouldn't, if they're the exposure to the forest, it's gonna start on the outside or up in the attic and
The narrative is that this was a huge, rapidly advancing forest fire that blew embers everywhere and caught these houses on fire.
Okay,
One house here is destroyed, right over there, the house is fine. And Matt and I did not see the evidence present for that theory to hold. In other words, what we saw were the trees around these homes that were completely destroyed, where the trees were burnt, we both observed that the fire on those trees and the burning process on those trees was probably secondary to the house itself burning.
interesting.
So it's the other way around. Instead of the
Interesting.
forest, burning in and burning these houses and consuming it, our evidence showed us time and time again that,
forest was the exposure.
Wow.
so the exposure is something that catches on fire because of another
result.
fire, yeah.
So it's logical. Go ahead.
And back to the metal having some significance to guardrails, posts catching fire, cars burning completely. We saw also like wood fences where they burned where the wire would go through. And they were fine everywhere else except they were burned where the wire attached.
Wow.
Or where metal
Or-
fasteners.
I saw another one. Oh, this
Wow.
one doesn't have wire. Why did it burn? Oh, it's just there's a metal spike
Wow.
there, and so it's just like, it's really interesting.
That is interesting. We have about 10 minutes left of the hour, which is just flying by. Could you guys recreate maybe the weather pattern that day? What did you hear of the fire? Did you get any information about winds or what the temperature of the
I know that PG&E had been putting out alerts that they might shut off power in case of high winds.
Okay.
I do know that was going on, but
Yeah.
obviously I don't live up there.
Yeah, right.
So we did have some witness accounts talking about heavy chemtrailing.
Okay.
I'm just going to come right out and say
Yeah, we're gonna-
chemtrailing.
We're gonna cover that next hour, which I'm so thankful
okay.
for.
Yeah, and I probably maybe the same witness. I mean, there was a witness that we interviewed up in Magalia, and they had mentioned that they walked out and everything seemed fine. Everything seemed calm that morning. First
Right.
thing, everything seemed calm and
Right.
fine.
Right.
So,
Smart winds.
Smart winds and smart fires.
I love that term. That's a
Wow.
brilliant term.
And that's
Smart.
going to be a great segue to our next hour of power here. So just as a recap for our listeners, we're basically saying what you saw was a lot of fire at the base. The canopy of the trees were not really touched. In a typical forest fire, you would see,
We'd expect it, with the destruction in the middle of the tree, we'd expect it to crown out.
In order to
Crown
do the total devastation that it did to all these houses and community subdivisions, I would expect the crowns to be gone, the canopy to be gone.
right. And you're saying we saw hollowed out trees where the limbs wouldn't necessarily be burned, but the trunk and also the roots would be completely,
Yes.
And that was
incinerated.
consistent over and over again. So
Over and
the
over.
concentration of heat appears to be close to the ground,
Yeah.
down.
Down on the
Yep.
ground.
Yep.
And then you're seeing these cars, same concept, where there's nothing around to spark the fire of a car. All the cars that you've seen, for the most part, are incinerated, except for just the cage of the car itself. And we're also going to say glass was kind of warping a little bit, so suggestive of a very high
No, like
temperature.
very close to melting,
Melting.
I would say.
And what does glass melt at? Do you know?
It's
3,000?
27, somewhere
Yeah,
in there.
26, 27,
Yeah.
100
Yeah.
degrees.
26,
Yeah.
27 degrees. So we're not dealing with a typical forest fire. In all the years, you had mentioned that this is a huge anomalies. You've never seen fires behave like this, but now you're starting to see kind of these patterns with the
Tubbs
Santa
fire.
Rosa Tubbs fire, the lake fire up here.
Pictures I've seen from the car fire, same thing. So,
So,
overturned
yeah,
vehicles.
when we were up there on the 7th, we tried to get into an area and they denied us, they wouldn't let us in. And the California Highway Patrol officer was really nice, and he basically said, look, he goes, this could be straight with you guys. When we come out here, we do our shift, and he says, we get a briefing. And they are doing work back in there that makes it too hazardous to go back in. And then he points down the hill, down into this draw where the
Yeah.
roadway was. He said they just did a culvert replacement down there.
So that piqued your interest.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they're doing this pattern of
Yeah.
replacing these culverts, and the guardrails are being replaced with all metal.
You could literally see where the fresh, where, they had cut the blacktop, pulled the old culvert, put another one in, and then they had fresh blacktop over where the repair was made.
Wow, wow. So our time is just about up. If you're just tuning in for the first hour, I'm with two guests, John Lord and Matt, veteran firefighters, retired, and they're giving us some first-hand expert testimonies of the Paradise Fire. John, how can our listeners, if they want to learn more about some of your other work?
Probably the same way we did it before, shall we?
yeah.
Which would be to go through the site.
Yeah, go through and just remind our listeners where that is. Is it on YouTube?
No, through your...
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
To get a hold of you, you're going to go ahead and call the station guys, ferlive.com. But he has also some interviews out there on YouTube, and the best way to do that is to just retired firefighter.
Retired fire captain.
Retired
Exclusive interview with retired fire captain. Yeah.
And so we're really blessed. And how about you, Matt?
So I actually, this is my second
This is-
my second
Yeah.
interview, and I've focused on research, so I don't even have a
Yeah, so
webpage
if
up yet.
if they need to get a hold of you, just contact the radio station.
Correct, and through
And
you,
they'll get,
through you.
yep,
Yeah,
we'll get
that
that. All right, guys, so you heard it here live, not live, but our recording, a special interview. Next, what can we talk about next hour? What do you want to get into?
I want to finish up on the steel.
Yeah, we
Like
haven't,
in the mobile home parks.
yeah, we'll
Yeah.
finish up on that, and then we'll talk about resource deployment,
Yes.
so.
So we're gonna talk about that next hour. Resource deployment, we're gonna talk about the steel. And then, what else can we get into? Do you think we can talk a little bit about, some theories of stuff?
Ultimately, we're going to wrap it to that.
We'll get to the,
Okay.
get to our theories.
Awesome.
But yeah, the staging of resources, maybe some witness testimony, and.
Excellent, awesome, guys. All right, so tune back in. You're listening to FERlive.com, Down the Rabbit Hole with Shelley Lewis. Come back for the second hour, guys. We have a lot of more information to cover on these Paradise Fires. See you soon. Hang on tight.